Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of CRNA School Prep Academy. I'm your host, Jenny Fennell, CRNA. Welcome back. This week, we are going to cover different things that I have learned about studying. And so back when we first started this podcast, I kind of share with you guys some study tips that I use during school. It continues to be one of the most downloaded episodes that we have, which says to me that you guys really clearly want more help in this area. And so a book that first and foremost, I'm going to recommend that you definitely read, whether it's, physical book or on audio, is Make It Stick. Programs recommend this book to, a lot of programs recommend this book to their students to read prior to starting to school. But I have recently been listening to this book and taking notes, and it is awesome. And it's actually been very eye-opening to me because as I thought I knew how to study, and back in probably 2010, when I got rejected from nursing school, I finally came to the conclusion that I didn't know how to effectively study for myself. As a younger student, I found out I had dyslexia. I kind of just always felt like I was stupid because of it, to be quite honest, which was unfortunate and this is all on me, meaning I had plenty of good mentors in my life, plenty like my parents and everyone around me saying, Jenny, you're not stupid, you're smart, you can do this, whatever. But I believed it that I just couldn't easily learn the way I saw other students learn. And so I immediately thought, okay, well, it means I'm not capable. And it wasn't until I was faced with not pursuing nursing that I was kind of like forced with, okay, I got to figure this out. I should be able to do this. I want to be able to do this. How can I get better grades so I can get into the College of Nursing? And at that time, I started Googling study techniques and I started trying them all, meaning I was open to trying anything, even listening to notes in my sleep. I'd bring a recorder with me to class and I'd re-listen to those recordings. And talk about I just tried all the different things, meaning I try to utilize all of my senses. And what I found was I can get straight A's. And it was kind of a very eye-opening experience for me to go from being a BC student to a straight A student, all because I was willing to do something different with my study techniques and to try to learn a different way for me and not do the typical read and try to memorize. And what I started doing instead is I tried to understand versus memorize. And it sounds really basic and it sounds really silly, but I can tell you, even if you don't realize you're doing it, you're actually memorizing versus understanding, especially if you're trying to look at a study guide and just trying to memorize a study guide. Like, you need to be understanding what you're studying versus trying to memorize what you're studying. Okay. But, your memory is a very unique part of your body, like your makeup, your chemical makeup. Like, your brain is amazing. First of all, it's just super cool. There's neural pathways that connect different thoughts, emotions, and it's very complex. Okay. But that being said, learning is no different. It's your brain creates pathways so you can learn how to speak, so you can learn how to walk, so you can learn how to eat. Think about a child, all the things that they have to do and learn just to function as a normal person. They have to learn a lot. And does it happen overnight to cram, to become from a baby to a toddler, or from a toddler to a school child? No, it takes years for them to learn information that they're expected to know as an adult. Okay. So first and foremost, this stuff takes time to develop real, true knowledge and a deep understanding. It takes time. And I think as a human who also loves Amazon, who likes the fact that you can order something one day and have it on your doorstep the next day, it's like that instant gratification. Like, I want it now, like you're impatient. You don't want to wait. And so I think we get impatient with ourselves when it comes to learning. At least I know I did, where I wanted to see results and I wanted to see results quick. And so what I ended up doing because of that is I found myself trying to memorize like right before a test, so I would perform better, but then I wouldn't do good on the final, so I'm like, well, what the heck? Like, I did so good on the midterms. Like, why am I not doing good on the final? And you guys, it's because I wasn't building a long-term memory. I was memorizing versus consolidating my knowledge and understanding it in a way that would make my brain use it for longer term storage. Okay. There's a big difference between short-term memory and long-term memory. And yes, short-term memory can give you more instant gratification with the results, but long-term memory is going to carry with you over the years and it's going to make you a stronger overall academically and help you when it comes to that final. Because you can't just do good on the midterms. You have to do good on the final. And the final is going to cover information from the very beginning of your semester. And so you can't neglect actually understanding the information from the beginning of the school year. Okay. And so that's kind of one of the first mistakes I want to let you guys in on, is that if you're not playing the long game when it comes to learning, you're not going to do yourself any favors down the road. All right. You're really just going to continue to struggle and not understand why. But you'll hear people say, okay, well, are you a visual learner? Are you an auditory learner? Are you a hands-on learner? And then find your style and stick with that. Okay. And I did that. I thought, okay, well, I don't like reading. I have issues reading. I have issues comprehending reading, due to my dyslexia. But I always saw people read to study. So I did do that quite often, which didn't really get me anywhere. And it really caused a lot of frustration. I felt like I was spending twice as long doing everything to really get the same comprehension, and it still wasn't there. So then I was like, okay, well, I'm an auditory learner, so I need to listen to everything. And I still actually really enjoy auditory learning. And I love podcasts because I love listening and learning. However, there is so much good stuff out there, you guys, that I hear that I'm like, oh, I want to remember that. Oh, it's so good. And then like the next day, I'm like, damn, I can't recall that. It's frustrating. So I'm like, I told myself at the time I heard it that I need to remember this. And then when I try to recall, even like the next day, I'm like, I can't remember it. And it's frustrating to me. So I'm like, I've heard so much amazing stuff on podcasts that I've been a big podcaster. Obviously now I have my own podcast over the last, year and a half, 2 years. And I have taken such a small chunk of that, but doesn't mean it's not worth my time, because a small chunk still plays in volumes down the road, because it's a cumulative effect. It's not instant gratification. I can't recite things that I hear all the time. Like I wish I could, but I still know it's worth my time to listen to it. But here's the thing. Okay. So I know I'm a good auditory learner, but that shouldn't be the only way I learn. Because like I said, I still don't have the recall that I need to probably go take a test on something I listened to the very next day. So I need to write things down. I do know that. Okay. So I don't like reading. But I do need to still read a little bit, right? I still need to try to read for comprehension, but I know that I obviously don't get that as well or as easily as I do auditory or handwriting my notes. And so maybe my reading is still there, but it's just a smaller chunk of what I do. Writing things while I listen is a bigger way of me comprehending what I am learning than just listening alone. And then if I combine reading with it, it's even stronger. So I encourage you not to pigeonhole yourself into one method works the best for you and only stick to that method. You need to combine multiple methods to actually have a good, solid study technique. So again, retrieval practice is more than just rereading and re-listening and mindlessly until you're like, I know what's next. I've been doing these flashcards so much that I even know what flashcards next. Don't do that. You're not going to do yourself any favors. Mix up those flashcards, take a break, get a different topic, then come back to your original topic, or maybe pick 3 topics, do an hour of each, and see how you can build and kind of expand your knowledge by doing something called interleaving that allows you to kind of connect pieces as you go. It'll, again, learning some pharmacology after you just studied some physiology and understanding how positive inotropes work, for example, like I like atropine, but then understanding the physiology process of what it means to increase your heart rate. What does that do for your cardiac output? See what I mean? You need to be using both types of information to build an understanding of that pharmacology with the understanding of physiology behind it. It'll give you a more solid foundation to truly understand atropine and how it actually works on your physiology process. It's not just let's study pharmacology, memorize, the mechanism of action and yada, yada, yada. You have to have meaning in your brain. You have to be able to have it relate to something. All knowledge is built upon old knowledge. You don't just come in and understand how to code a computer. You have to start with the basics and build up to that. Anesthesia school is the same thing. You come in with basic understanding of pharmacology, physiology, and you build on it every single day that you're in class, essentially. And, a lot of times students will explain it, they feel like they're drinking from a fire hose. The problem with the reason why it feels like that is because you're probably still stuck in trying to memorize things versus building on things. The more you build on concepts, the less it's going to feel like you're drowning in the amount of information. Don't get me wrong, it's still going to be a lot, but you'll be able to lessen that burden by having an understanding. So it's not going to feel like memorization. It's not going to feel like overwhelming when you can easily recall something because you can actually relate the 2 subjects and understand how they work together. And same thing that goes like when you're taking a test, for example, when you get a test question you're not sure about, you're like, well, and so one of the things I said this in the previous episode is I used to practice routinely reading a question and trying to answer it before I look at the answers. And the reason why I did that, I didn't know this, but after reading this book, the reason that actually made me a stronger learner, because I had to work hard to recall this active recall process. I had to really think really hard to pull the information out. And by thinking hard and having to be effortful, meaning it was hard to think of all the stuff and come up with like a brain dump kind of thing before I looked at the answers. It caused effort, and that caused me to learn that information more solid. Sometimes it would work out in my favor, where after I would do that and think that mentally recall these things that I would think could be the answer to this question, I would then look at my list of possible answers and see my answer and be like, cool, I knew that. Other times I would look at my list of possible answers and be like, damn, I don't know this still, even though I just did a brain dump, And so when that would happen, I would be like, okay, well, there's clearly something I'm missing. There's clearly something I don't know. Let's come back to it. I would continue on my test. Now you can't do this on boards. And so this is a technique that I would practice during school when I was taking tests. But what it served me later on doing was it helped me connect the pieces. So I had to do it less and less and less as I progressed in the program. But I would potentially read a question later on that would jog something in my memory that would connect to another question that would allow me to pull out that information to help me make a better educated choice on the answer to that question. I know that was kind of confusing, but essentially it was allowing me to connect two pieces of information to come to a educated guess on something that I did not know that well. Another thing that I want to point out to you guys that you need to be doing is you need to be assessing yourself and what you know, because one thing that when you're studying, especially the amount of studying you're going to be doing in school, is you're going to eventually become this optical illusion, meaning you're like, I am good. I got this. Like, I feel solid, and then you take a test and you're like, I just got rocked. Or it could be maybe a final. Again, like I said, maybe you thought you understood all this stuff all along, but you really weren't connecting the pieces to allow a deeper understanding that would allow you to recall information longer term. And, essentially I encourage you to quiz yourself to understand what you don't know, meaning you should always be assessing what you don't know and what you do know. And that way you can make educated guesses with a better, more accurate reflection of what your competency is on a certain particular topic. And one thing that I probably didn't utilize as much as I should have, but I did, and it was always extremely helpful, was quizzing myself. And whether that's through a study guide, whether that's in a group setting on my own, my husband helped me a lot of times, would quiz me on certain things. I would give him a sheet of paper and say, ask me questions and mix it up. So like what would happen is I would be studying a study guide and I would start knowing the order of the questions. I studied it so much. You have to mix it up. You can't mentally prepare what you think is next because you've studied it so much. So you have to throw yourself off a little bit. It's just like when you're learning the skill. Okay, think about it. You're in simulation lab. You learn how to do epidurals, and there's a step-by-step process, right? Well, now, what if they tell you go backwards? How easy is that? That's a little bit harder. Okay, well now start at step 3 and then go forward from there. I mean, if you were to really force yourself to do this and really think about, oh gosh, what's step 3 when I want to start at step 1? It's actually a little bit harder to do that. Just like it'd be hard to start at the alphabet in the middle and go all the way to the end, or it'd be hard to recite the alphabet backwards than going forward, because you've practiced forward so many times. It's much harder to recite it backwards, and it's much harder to pick it up in the middle and go forward, or middle and go backwards, because again, you haven't rehearsed it. You haven't practiced it as much. But if you did these things, you would freaking have it down, right? You would know it. And then therefore, if you get in a situation where you're more apt to adapt or be adaptable and flexible with your knowledge, when you can essentially look at it at different viewpoints, mix it up a little bit, learn it in different ways. You don't see results as quickly, meaning, and here's another example. So let's say you learned your epidurals in clinical, you went and did your rotation, you felt like a rock star. Okay, 3 months have gone by. Now you're in your open heart rotation. Well, the one heart that was on today got canceled. Let's go take you up to OB. Ooh, it's been 3 months and I haven't done it in a while and I haven't practiced it, and you're going to feel really rusty and you're going to feel kind of sloppy, where when you had it 3 months ago and you were routinely practicing it, you felt like a rock star. And it's because you actually have some forgetting going on. However, when you experience that stress, that emotion, that effort of trying to recall the information you had learned 3 months ago, now going forward, 4 months later, when they do this to you again, you're sent back up to OB, you're going to feel way more comfortable because you now have really forced that active recall. And so even though it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel good to be put under that pressure, that stress. This is kind of like, you're going to hear that you're going to get pimped in clinical, and it's probably not the best term. I'm not sure who coined it. They should get some credit though. Whoever they are, I should find out their name. But essentially all that means is you're going to get asked questions. And sometimes the pimping can occur during high stress moments, meaning like you're in the middle of manipulating the airway and they're pimping you on how much O2 is, what's your minute O2 demand, meaning how much does your body utilize O2 every minute. And you're just like, I don't know. I'm just trying to get this airway. Like, can I like at least get through this task before I try to answer that? And even though it seems kind of harsh, it seems kind of mean, if you really were to be able to do both at once, you are going to solidify that knowledge because you have used a lot of effort to recall that knowledge, and it's puts you under some pressure. And so you tend to remember those moments, and what essentially pimping, you tend to learn that way. And so I think old school thought was to pimp to help students learn. But it has turned into kind of what perceived as, and it can be used inappropriately as more like bullying. But I think in the right way, it's a good thing as long as you do it in the right way. It's just obviously we're all humans and we all have our own ways, and some people just don't do it the right way and they come across more as a bully. And so, it is what it is, but the idea is making you actively recall and having it be very effortful to help you remember it. Ultimately to help you be a better practitioner, do better in your classes and all other things. But I just wanted to point it out that as you go through your training, you're going to notice when you're putting these high stress situations and you're forced to recall things down the road, if a similar situation happens, you're actually going to have an easier time now recalling that information because you have already had to use some force to get it out before. Okay. And so that's kind of some ideas I want to put in your guys' head around studying, and utilizing testing and quizzing yourself as a way to gauge how much knowledge you're gaining from your studying. Also, and I know I mentioned in the last one, to kind of know when you take a break. You can't learn when you're fatigued. When you're fatigued, you're just not going to be able to take in new information. And that's a huge problem with students, especially new anesthesia students, is they try to study when they're super tired. There is some research out there that literally looks at how effective studying is with certain temperatures, with lighting, with whether you have eaten recently or whether you're hungry or not hungry, whether how much sleep you have had. And sleep actually has been a big factor in how well you can consolidate your information. Meaning if you lack sleep, meaning again, if you are going on no sleep and you're trying to study, you're going to have less ability to actually consolidate your information you're taking in, and you're going to get less gains out of it. So it doesn't make any sense to study tired. It's better to go to sleep, get up early and start taking information than it is to try to study while you're really tired. One thing that I also did routinely in school, and again, I didn't think about it at the time, but I used to love studying right before I went to bed. So much so that I would wake up with like highlighter all over my sheets. Like our bed sheets were like streaked with highlighter because I would just fall asleep with the book and then roll around with my highlighter all night. But I didn't know at the time, but doing that actually helped me recall it way better. Because for something about going to sleep right afterwards, that information I studied right before I went to bed, and it wasn't usually a lot of information because again, I was tired. But I would study like a small chunk of information, like literally like not even a chapter's worth, like a couple pages, like really like just something that I knew I wanted to kind of brush up on. And I would literally probably get a few pages in and be like, okay, I'm done. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. But that information really stuck with me. But I didn't try to force myself to stay awake and keep studying, because then that probably wouldn't do me any good. But I definitely read to where I fell asleep and then I was done. And so that's something that you can think about doing as well. Maybe don't use a highlighter. I don't know, unless you're cool with your bed sheets being stained. We actually still have those bed sheets. It was a duvet cover that we didn't have a comforter on, and now it has a comforter, so you can't see all the highlighting streaks. So again, I want to point out too, like a lot of times a mistake that people have used in their undergrad years, which may have served you well, because maybe it wasn't as much information that you're going to get slammed with in grad school, but it was the cramming technique, meaning you would cram on study guides before test, you go on the test, do that, you just this on repeat. You really weren't doing yourself any favors long-term, because again, you weren't building those connections, you weren't building long-term memory. And so even same with like mass practice, you can practice a hit on your tennis racket over and over and over and over, and you're gonna feel like, okay, I got this down, I'm able to do it. But then 3 days later, you're not going to be able to do it as frequently as you were doing it the other day, because now you've forgotten a little bit. You're going to have to reteach it or relearn it a little bit. And it's good to relearn something. It's actually good to allow yourself to kind of forget a little bit and go back at something. And so don't cram and never return the information. You need to study in a way that you consolidate and understand, and then return the information after you just give it a few days rest. It's same thing like if you're writing an essay and like that first copy, that first proof is like you just essentially doing a brain dump. You're getting all your ideas out. You're trying to organize your thoughts. If you go back a day or two later, you're like, oh, I could totally change this up a little bit. Now I have even more insights on this. You've had time to let it soak a little bit. And now you have even more to add to it and more organization to make it more clear and concise and prettier, right? And so the same thing that goes with studying. You can learn something one day and you're going to feel sloppy. You're gonna be like, I'm so unorganized. I don't understand it all. How's it all going to make sense? Give yourself some time to like digest all the information and go back a day or two later and try to make yourself recall what you learned and then try to refresh yourself and kind of repeat this process over and over and over again, allowing yourself some time in between studying topics, which again, and then practicing the recall, because over time you're going to get better and quicker at it. And you're not going to have to use as much force to recall it. But remember that something being difficult to remember is actually a good thing in a way that'll actually help you recall it even faster and stronger and make it more durable down the road. Some things to kind of point out though, like, as much as I saying like effort actually creates long-term memory, struggling, trying to study and read does not necessarily help you. So back to the whole knowing how it works, what works well for you. I'm not saying that, if this method doesn't work for you, to do it all the time. I want you to kind of explore that, but I don't want you to be closed off to trying different methods, because I really think you need a blend of a bunch of things to kind of aid in your success in studying. I know, like for me, associating things with like emotion or other memories that I have, even if it didn't make that much sense, I just tried to do it. Like, if something was red, it was bad because the devil's red, or I don't know, if something's ick, it means it's sick. It means it's bad. Icky is sticky. I don't know. I just like silly little things that if I could tell you what's in my brain, you'd be like, Jenny, you have problems. But again, when I was studying, I would try to relate various terms to things that created an emotion in my brain that like made it sound good or bad or evil or happy or sad, or related to something else I knew that really helped me recall it later on. So you can play with it, you know what I mean? Make acronyms, mnemonics, those types of things. Again, if you do flashcards, great, but just make sure you mix it up a little bit. Make sure you don't memorize the pattern, because you're not going to be challenging yourself as much. And so when you're studying and things get easy, I encourage you to see, do I need to change it up? If this is so, like, I remember like when I was studying for boards, I remember being like, well, I don't know if I'm memorizing the content so I know the answers, or if I actually truly know the content. It was really frustrating for me. And so, what I did is I went out, I had a board prep thing that I had bought. I had been through it like 3 different times, over and over and over and over again, to where again, I was like, I don't know if I know this information or if I just have it memorized by now. So I went and bought a separate board prep that I had never done. And it was hard and it challenged me. It like knocked my socks off kind of hard. And I'm like, oh, wow. And overall, I did good, even though it was hard, but it really helped me pinpoint areas that maybe I was a little more weak in. It also really forced me to see something I'd never seen before and be asked questions in a different way that really challenged my recall. And so it was really good to kind of mix it up a little bit and challenge myself in a way that I had not been exposed to before. And so that really, I think, helped solidify my board prep and whether I was ready to take boards. It's kind of changing it up a little bit and trying something a little bit different. But yeah, and also understanding whether you work good in group settings or on your own. I mean, I know like me, I like group settings. However, sometimes they can be more of a distraction than actually helpful, because you start talking about other things, or, you know what I mean? You're not actually focused on the work. So be selective in who you pick to do this and make sure you're all just as serious about it. So you make sure your time is used wisely. But man, quizzing each other was an awesome way to study. Like we would study that way in the car before we had to commute to class a couple hours. It was such a great way to study. It really, really helps solidify my learning. And also when you study with other people, you get to hear their rationales as to how they understand a concept, which could be different than yours. And so when you're reading a material and you're reading one way to understand it, I encourage you to use multiple textbooks, especially if you don't understand something. I would have all my anesthesia textbooks and I would hit them all, especially if I had a topic that I really wanted to understand. I would look at what Barrett said and what Nagelhouse said. And, again, I would compare all my anesthesia books to kind of learn one topic, because they all had something a little bit unique to it that really tried to help my understanding, as well as your notes and things like that. But asking your classmates to explain something to you and how they get it could also be very, very helpful for you in your learning. So I think that kind of covers most of my topic today. One last thing I want to point out is that when you experience test anxiety, and I know that this happens quite frequently in anesthesia school because you feel like your life is riding on the line, right? You feel like this matters. This is make or break it, meaning if you don't do well in school, you get kicked out, all this hard work's going to be for nothing. And I know, and you work your butt off to get into school. So I get the immense amount of pressure that you're under. But I really encourage you to check yourself because, you have to get that right in your mind, because you're going to hinder yourself and your ability to display your knowledge when you're kind of have this fear lingering over you. So just address it head on, deal with it, and try to come to terms as to why this is and why you feel this way. And really keep testing yourself on your own before it's the big day, meaning don't wait till your actual real test day to test your knowledge. Test yourself and then hit your weak points. That'll give you more confidence going into your test, knowing that you've been able to test yourself well and pinpoint your weak points. And it will allow you to not feel as anxious for the test. Okay. And also see if you can review your old tests. A lot of times you have to do this with the professor in the room. They can't just trust any student to go review a test because it's too tempting to take pictures and screenshots and things like that these days. So some programs may or may not allow this, but if they do allow it, it's a really, really great way to find out what you don't know so you can improve upon it. And really, if you do this, that in itself will allow you to feel less anxious because you're like, okay, I know what I need to improve upon. And now I know what actions I need to take. And don't be afraid to go ask for help. It's about be proactive in your learning, be someone who essentially seeks out resources before it's too late. Don't wait till you have a bad test, or don't wait till you feel so flustered about a topic that you just want to cry. Go get help early on when you need some help understanding, and meet with your professor ahead of time, meet with students ahead of time. Try to gain that understanding prior to it causing so much anxiety for you to where you're fearful of not doing well on the test because of it. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. There's going to be more to come. Again, this is a really common topic that people love to hear about. So I actually have more to share with you, but I'm going to break this up in different sessions. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and you guys all have a good rest of your day. We'll see you next week.